Hey, we're back again with another book review. I'm Sydney from the Curiouser and Curiouser51 YouTube and Instagram. Of course, there is a dot between the Curiouser and Curiouser51, so it is at curiouser.and.curiouser.51. This channel looks at everything museum related that you could possibly think of, from collections, content interpretation, educational programs, and yes, book reviews that have to do with museums. So far, we have looked at art museums, history museums, science museums, from the National Railway Museum, which seems to be the most popular video that I have made so far, as well as the York Minster, the National Museum of Scotland, the National Gallery of Scotland, and even, of course, Bergen Aquarium, which aquariums and zoos are museums. My YouTube is updated every Sunday. Every Sunday we'll have a book review as well as shorts, and my Instagram is updated sporadically throughout the week with reels, posts, stories, and reposts. Last week we looked at Meet Me at the Museum by Anne Youngson, which was one of my favorite books, and this week we will be looking at When the Museum is Closed by Emi Yagi. Of course, this book is museum related. It would not be on this channel if it was not museum related, and next week we will be looking at the Louvre, excuse my pronunciation, which is a collection of poems that have to do with the collections at the Louvre. But let's get back to today's book, which, again, I say it a lot, but it quickly became one of my favorites, and it is a short and sweet read. It is only about 146 pages. It took me about 2 hours to read. It's very quick. Again, a great travel book. It is very important to read the blurb about the book, as well as maybe a little bit about the author if you're into that, if the title catches your eye. And again, the first couple of sentences on the first page will usually give you a pretty good indication of whether or not you would like to read the book. So this book has a short little kind of, not really quote on the back, but a little sentence from the book, so there's that covered for you. And the inside of the book has the blurb, so I will read you both. There she stood, a goddess. I had been hired to talk to the ancient statue of Venus. I was in love with the marble goddess. That honestly drew me right in when I first read it, and of course it has museum in the title, so of course I was going to read it. Now I will read the blurb. I apologize for the mispronunciation of the last name. I looked up how to pronounce it, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. The first name is correct pronunciation, but again, I do apologize. Rika Hirauchi's new part-time job is to converse with the statue of Venus in Latin every Monday when the museum is closed. Initially reluctant, Rika starts to enjoy her strange new job. Recommended by her old university professor for her exemplary language skills, Rika leads an otherwise unassuming life, working the rest of the week in a frozen food warehouse. As Venus comes to life in the quiet of the museum, they talk about everything. Venus opens up new worlds for Rika, both intellectually and emotionally. They soon fall in love. But when the museum's curator, Hashibami, makes it clear that he wants to keep Venus for himself, what will Rika do? When the Museum is Closed is by turns charming, funny, and surprising, a surreal take on our most real emotions and concerns: love, loneliness, freedom, perception of beauty, and how women are seen in society. A joyful queer love story, this fresh and original new novel confirms Emi Yagi is one of the most exciting Japanese writers published in English today. So again, blurb is super important to read when you're looking for a new book, and I really like this blurb and the little quote on the back, as it gives you a little taste of what the book is about, and again, it draws you right in. As mentioned in the blurb, the main characters are a Venus statue and Rika, who comes into the museum every Monday and she talks to the statue in Latin. Now, this is a very important point, the fact that she speaks to the statue in Latin, as each statue within the museum speaks the language of their creator. It is also noted that she is sometimes labeled as Aphrodite, so it's very important the distinction between Venus and Aphrodite as a Roman versus Greek interpretation. Some of the statues speak French, some of them speak English, and again, most of them speak Latin or Greek. The setting is modern day, so it does not take place in the past. It is supposed to be in our present day, as is what is happening inside a museum at this very moment. Another reason I really like this book is because it reminded me of one of my favorite movies, Night at the Museum. No surprise there, that is one of my favorite movies, but again, the Venus statue coming to life, being able to talk to the artifacts within the museum, that's just something I would love to do, and this book really brings it to life. Now, there is another character in this book besides Venus and Rika who does play a significant role, which is the museum curator. Now, again, I don't want to spoil too much, as I want you to go read this book. It is a great book, but the curator does play a pivotal role within how, in my opinion, it connects museum collections to the community. The way that the curator treats the statue of Venus is very different than the way Rika treats the statue of Venus, as the curator is very meticulous, analytical, and particular with the statue itself, cleaning the statue, making sure no one gets too close to the statue, and overall just kind of being a little bit controlling when it comes to Venus. Now, the way the curator treats the statue of Venus could be seen as a reflection of how society treats women today. Because of this highlights how the author tries to connect this story to the real world. It may seem very fictional, but again, some of the topics discussed in the book are a reflection of what is happening in society today. Not only could it reflect how women are treated in society, but I also saw it as a way of how objects are treated within museums. The almost possessiveness of the curator over the statue of Venus can reflect the possessiveness often seen of curators or institutions over artifacts within their collections. Now, there is a whole debate concerning decolonization and repatriation of collections within museums, but that would be a whole nother video that we'd have to get into, so I'm only going to give you a little small snippet of what I believe the connections between this book and museum collections are. The scientific, analytical, and controlling aspect in which the curator approaches the statue of Venus, such as meticulously cleaning the statue, controlling the environment, and who sees the statue, is a reflection of how objects are often treated. But again, museums do have the issue of some artifacts that are, for example, musical instruments being ceremonial. Now, this gets into the debate over whether some objects should be in museums or they shouldn't be in museums. I'm not going to argue the pros and cons of certain objects being in museums or not, as again, that is a whole nother video and a whole nother topic for another day. However, I will say it is interesting to see this book cover how this statue would like to be free and would like to travel the world, as it reflects how often some artifacts or objects within museums come from many different places and are often stuck within certain museums. This again brings up the whole debate of how communities can be involved in museums and how people can get involved in museums and educate people on the artifacts or objects of their cultures that are within museums. It is often up to the curator of the museum to correctly display and make sure that all bases are covered when it comes to how the object should be displayed or how it should be interpreted. This comes back to the book as, again, the Venus statue is in a controlled room and the curator is controlling who can and cannot see or talk to this statue. Again, this book became very interesting to me because of these aspects that I am discussing and covering, not only because I've studied museums my whole life, but also because I wrote my thesis on the concept of decolonization and repatriation. We of course will discuss that in another video if that is of interest, but that is just my 2 cents on the matter. Another important aspect to this book is that Rika is often depicted or talks about wearing a giant yellow raincoat covering her, and it's almost as if she uses this as a shield. In my interpretation, I interpreted it as anxiety or her just not being confident in herself. And of course, relating this back to museums, I saw this as museums can be intimidating, and it's almost as if she's using this raincoat to protect herself. Now, she doesn't just have this raincoat in the museum, but it also shows that throughout the book, the raincoat disappears, it comes back, it's still there a little bit, but the museum is a contributing factor as to how she feels and what makes the raincoat go away. Again, I want to make museums less intimidating by doing book reviews like these, as well as sharing overviews of very large and confusing museums. So when I read this part of the book, I thought this would be really interesting to talk about. Not only does it show that museums can be intimidating, it also shows that museums are a place for you to be yourself and to discover, explore, and educate yourself on things that may interest you. Whether that be sculptures, paintings, little arrowheads, bronze artifacts, anything. Museums are a place where people can talk and discuss and just explore the history around them. So that's what I liked about the book, what I think is interesting about the book, and again, how it relates back to museums and making them seem less intimidating. These are just some things to think about: whether objects should be displayed in museums, what objects shouldn't be displayed in museums. Is it up to the communities or the curator to interpret these objects? This brought up the question of whether or not some objects should be displayed. There's often debate with human remains as well as ceremonial objects. In my opinion, this book discusses that topic in a very interesting way by making the objects come alive. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, so that will be it for the overview of the book for now, as well as the topics of discussion on museums and collections. I got this book, I believe, at Waterstones. It can be found, again, online on Amazon, as most things can be, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Topping Company, whatever bookstore that's near you. As I said before, the next book that will be discussed is At the Louvre. Again, I apologize for my pronunciation, and it is a poetry book with 100 contemporary poets. The book discusses the collections within the Louvre and connects poems to the collections, or often the poems are inspired by objects within the Louvre. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, you can find me at curiouser.and.curiouser.51 on Instagram and YouTube. Thank you so much for the 50 followers and the 33 subscribers. There will be more content coming out soon, again, updated every Sunday, reels sporadically throughout the week on Instagram. So thanks so much for watching, and here's to making museums less intimidating, one book review at a time and one museum visit at a time. See you later!